The Tampa Bay Buccaneers won a big-time Monday Night Football game the other night against the Houston Texans, 2019, in what started off as a fireworks show. I kind of missed the start of the game because I was at the end of Monday's show in here. Sit down and watch the rest of it, and it's a defensive stalemate, right? Like there's special teams plays being made by Houston, and then Nick Chubb breaks up a long run. It's like, oh, here we go. Texans are going to win this game. I was high on the Texans come in, and I'll touch on them in about 10 minutes or so. But, hey, they're at home. As I said on the show, Houston is a very underrated home field advantage, especially for a big nationally televised Monday Night Football game. 0-1, you want to get a W. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. But then I sit back and remember, I'm like, oh, shoot. Baker, touchdown maker is on the other side. The man who is as clutch of a quarterback as we've seen in the NFL, obviously leads a game-winning drive last week to beat Atlanta, leads a game-winning drive this week, capped off by a Rachaad White touchdown at the end to get the job done. And before we sort of go into the crux of what I want to discuss, normally carving up the context, we do that segment a half hour into Wednesday's show, but because Alfred's coming on, I want to give plenty of time for him and then get to Bryce's best 10. We're just going to start the show off with it. So, as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, primetime Deion Sanders says, give me my theme music. On this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, I wanted to talk about Baker Mayfield, and not just Baker's journey individually, so to speak, but more so a truth that we have seen in the NFL play itself out over and over and over, particularly in the last decade or so. And we're going to use Baker as part of kind of like a case study, as a like before and after type of deal. So Baker, if you look at what he's done the last few years with Tampa Bay, he has been indisputably a top 10 quarterback. I mean, those numbers are at worst top 4. He's easily top 10. But Baker Mayfield since the start of last year, second in touchdown passes, third in pass yards per game, third in completion percentage, fourth in passer rating. Obviously, he and the Bucs have won the division the last 2 years in a row, and I have to imagine they are the overwhelming favorites to do that again. Maybe Atlanta gives them a little bit of a push, but safe to say Carolina and New Orleans aren't exactly going to give Tampa Bay any reason to fear them in the division standing. So it's going to be a two-horse race, Tampa, Atlanta. I think we all think Tampa's going to end up winning the division. Some injuries on the defense. Offensive line's a little bit beat up, but I think they'll be fine in the long run, in large part because they have number 6, Mr. Baker touchdown maker, as their quarterback. But it wasn't always like this. And if you go back, I would not encourage you to do so. I would not encourage you to do that. But if you go back a few years, recently as 2021, 22, yours truly was not exactly the biggest Baker Mayfield fan on planet Earth. I was like, he's a little bit smaller than you'd like. The arm strength doesn't necessarily blow you away. There's times he came into the season a little bit out of shape. The temperament was not what you would want it to be as a franchise quarterback. And oh, by the way, he happened to play in one of the two most desolate quarterback-thirsty franchises, them and the Jets, in the NFL. I'm, of course, talking about the Cleveland Browns. And Baker, given what he's done since 2023, but particularly since last year when he was, through 41 touchdown passes during the season. When you look at what he did last year, look at how he's starting the season in 2025. 2 game-winning drives against a good Atlanta team and a Houston Texans team on the road, Monday Night Football. They have won the AFC South the last 2 years. Like Houston, very real defense. We know it. Derek Stingley and Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter and all those guys bring to the table. To'o. But this is a guy who, through large stretches, I know he had a good rookie season, broke the rookie record at the time for touchdown passes. I know 2020, he helped the Browns get to the playoffs. But if you look back, most of that was defensive running game with Baker playing a little bit of a game manager role. You kind of look at Baker's numbers when the Browns get hot from like midseason on, yards per attempt go down, or no, let's say yards per attempt go down, but attempts go down. Kevin Stefanski, first-year head coach at the time in Cleveland's like, yeah, we're going to roll with Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Myles Garrett in that defense. And by the way, it got them all the way to Kansas City in the divisional round. It obviously worked. But if you look at Baker's numbers in Cleveland, he was, do we have the stat? Matter of fact, let me double check and make sure we've got that number because I don't want to, I don't want to mislead the audience. Let's make sure we can get that graphic in here. Hang on just a second, folks. Do we have it? Okay, I guess we don't have it. Either way, Baker, off the top of my head, it was like 92 touchdowns, 56 picks, passer rating of like 89, like fine. Like an 89 passer rating is not bad, but for a guy who was the first overall pick, you'd like that to be a little bit higher. It's kind of like what I've talked about with Trevor Lawrence. by all accounts, and certainly relative to his draft class, he's been fine. I mean, he's had moments, got him to the playoffs. He wasn't as bad as folks like to portray last week, but Trevor certainly has not lived up to being the number one overall pick in the draft, in large part for the same reason Baker didn't. Because he went to a poorly run franchise, and Cleveland poorly run is a compliment these days. They are one of the most disastrous franchises in all of sports. And then he goes to Carolina, and it's a disaster, poorly run franchise. Then goes to what I call quarterback rehabilitation school, also known as the Los Angeles Rams, has that nice 3-4 game stretch at the end of 2022. Remember that 99-yard drive on that TNF game against the Raiders, and has a big game against the Broncos on Christmas and plays well. Gets himself a contract in Tampa, wins the job over Kyle Trask, and he's been the franchise quarterback since. I think it is safe to say Baker is due for a pretty good raise this upcoming 2026 offseason. I think the Bucs front office is going to have to get ready to pay up because he's going to want that bag, and he absolutely has earned that. But it goes to a core rule. Man, in the NFL, unless you are just an all-time, we have never seen this before type of talent, at least 75% of your success is hinging on where you land. And we can use a few examples. So when Jared Goff was drafted number one overall by the Los Angeles Rams, actually the first ever pick since the Rams moved back to Los Angeles, out of Cal, it was like, okay, good pocket thrower, accurate. He was generally regarded as the best QB prospect in that 2016 class. He goes number one overall to a team that had not won a playoff game in over a decade, that had just relocated, had a head coach in Jeff Fisher, who, nice man, but I'm not exactly sure why Jeff Fisher still had the job in St. Louis, then Los Angeles. And as a rookie, Jared Goff was one of the worst quarterbacks you will ever see. So in 7 starts, this is what he did. I mean, it's bad. 5 touchdowns, 7 picks. He barely threw for 150 yards a game, barely completed over 50% of his throws, and a passer rating of 63. I mean, atrociously bad. And then in 2017, he gets McVay. And then 4 years later, he's traded to the Detroit Lions, and he gets Ben Johnson. He gets Dan Campbell in that great Lions culture. And Jared Goff since then has been an excellent quarterback. He's been in that top 10 discussion. 97 passer rating, 66% completion. TD to INT ratio is quite good. All of those things. Different quarterback. Where Jared Goff landed mattered. If they had botched the head coach hiring in 2017, had the Los Angeles Rams done that, I think it's safe to say Jared Goff is not a starting quarterback in the NFL today, because he probably would have stunted his development even more. He needed the good talent around him, and not just that, but more so the coaching and the schematics of a McVay, of a Ben Johnson later on in Detroit. We would not have seen Jared Goff become what he has become, which is a very productive quarterback. Went to a Super Bowl, has quarterbacked 2 teams to being the number 1 seed in his career. Another example is a guy who was in Baker's draft class, taking 2 slots after him, Sam Darnold. I mentioned that the Browns and the Jets are the most disastrously run quarterback franchises in the NFL. Well, look at Sam Darnold with the Jets. He was pretty bad. Only 6 more touchdowns than picks, barely over 200 passing yards, not even 60% completion, and a passer rating of 78. Like, okay, I guess better than Goff's rookie numbers, but still, Jets fans could not wait for it to move on. I think they might have started like 0-11, 0-12 or something crazy, I forget, and put themselves in position to get the second pick in that 2021 draft. Couldn't wait to move on. And then Darnold goes to Carolina, and it doesn't work so well. And then he's in San Francisco as Purdy's backup, doesn't get a lot of action. And then he steps in Minnesota in 2024. And since then, if we can just show Sam, since then, he's been an excellent quarterback. 37-14 touchdown to interception ratio. That'll work. 250 pass yards per game, 66% completion, passer rating over 100, ladies and gentlemen. He won 14 games in Minnesota last year, and as for Seattle, we'll see how it plays out. I'm not that high on the Seahawks, not terribly high on Darnold's fit there, but you give Sam Darnold, Kevin O'Connell, and Justin Jefferson and those weapons, like, oh, okay, that's the Sam Darnold with the big arm and the mobility and the physicality that we saw at USC. Not the guy who the Jets did everything they could, Adam Gase, to try and ruin. So if you look at multiple examples, and by the way, Carson Wentz is kind of an example in the other direction. Carson Wentz was drafted by, I think we all see today, a very well-run franchise in the Philadelphia Eagles. If we can look at Carson Wentz's numbers, I mean, the pass rating isn't great, but the man was like an MVP candidate in 2017. He was quarterbacking them to the number 1 seed before the injury, 113 pass touchdowns, 50 picks, almost 250 yards a game. Completion percentage not great, 62%, pass rating of 89. Like, This was a guy who showed you the upside, showed you the talent, probably wins MVP in 2017, if not for the injuries, and Doug Peterson and Alshon Jeffrey and Blunt and those weapons and the defense. And since then, since the Philadelphia Eagles move on, and by the way, they've gone to 2 Super Bowls, won 1. If we can look at Carson Wentz since then, not great. I mean, completion percentage and rating are basically the same. TD INT ratio, fine, I guess, for a backup, and 180 passing yards per game. This was a guy who choked Indianapolis' playoff appearance at the end of 2021, went to Washington in 22. That didn't work. He was with the Rams briefly, and then with Kansas City, and now he's with the Vikings. I think he's breaking a record. He's starting for like 6 teams or 5 or 6 teams or something crazy. I think it's 6, yeah, that Carson Wentz has started for, which might be an NFL record. It's up there with Ryan Fitzpatrick, at least. This was a guy who was completely reliant on the system around him, on the talent around him. And if he went to anything short of that, was not the same player. That's the story for most great quarterbacks. I mean, unless you're a Peyton Manning who goes to Indianapolis when the Colts were a disaster, within 2 years they're winning 13 games. That's rare. I mean, Tom Brady, 6th-round pick, so a little bit of a different context there, but the New England Patriots weren't exactly world beaters. Tom steps in, plays the game manager role they needed him to be, win a Super Bowl his first year as a starter. Within 5 years, he's the best quarterback in football. It's a discussion between him and Peyton, but Brady by 07 certainly is in that discussion, if not the top of that discussion. Where you land, unless you're an all-time legendary talent, like I think Mahomes is that. I think Mahomes would have been great virtually anywhere. Didn't hurt to get Andy Reid. I think Josh Allen is a prime example. Like, okay, Josh is an all-time talent, but if Josh doesn't get Brian Daboll and the stability of a Sean McDermott system who had just been to the playoffs 2 years before that, does Josh become the player that we see today? So much of your success is dependent on your circumstances. And that's true in life as well. There's no question. I am more impressed by somebody who comes from a middle-class socioeconomic background and ends up being the mayor of their county than I do somebody who's grew up a rich kid, Nepo baby, and ends up becoming a U.S. senator. I just am. You had to overcome more obstacles. That's what you're seeing with Baker Mayfield. By the way, was solid in Cleveland looking back. And by the way, the Browns couldn't wait to get him out of the building. And some of that, Baker, to his credit, did some maturing, did some introspection, looked at the areas in which he fell short and said, you know what? How that all worked out in Cleveland, that wasn't all the Browns. That was on me as well. You've seen Baker mature as a leader. You've seen him really galvanize that locker room in Tampa Bay. You've seen Baker take better care of his body. I feel like, again, maybe I'm crazy. I feel like since he's been in Tampa, at least since last year, I've seen an extra level of velocity in some of his throws. He's more mobile. The 4th down play to keep Tampa's drive alive late against Houston, Baker probably doesn't do that in Cleveland. He doesn't have the mobility in Cleveland to be able to do that. And so nothing but credit to Baker for not giving up, for staying, for improving as a leader, for improving his temperament, all of those things. Because the talent was there. There's a reason he was the first pick. He was a Heisman Trophy winner at Oklahoma. He was a great college player. He was able to put it together, get to a great run organization in Tampa Bay, which has been well run for the last 5+ years, really since Brady got there in 2020. Good coaching staff with Bowles, who takes care of the defense, great O-line, weapons, run game. And you look at Tampa Bay today, and you're like, could that team be a legit contender in the NFC? You'll see where I have them in Bryce's best 10. I think they are. I think they absolutely are. They can. Their offense hasn't even hit full rhythm. You see in that game against Houston, who has a great defense, so you got to take that in consideration. But they haven't quite hit their stride yet. Now, they were missing Godwin, Tristan Wirfs, but once they get that unit healthy, they're going to be one of the scariest offenses in football. And Baker Mayfield, to his credit, on this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, where you land matters, and Baker has shown us that, and has shown us some real growth and improvement in terms of what he's done with the Tampa Bay Bucs. Here's Baker after that game-winning drive on Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what I told you guys last week, in these 2-minute close games, we were not on the right side of things for the past couple of years, and it's good to see that we haven't even played close to our best ball in all 3 phases, and we're still finding ways to win on the road, and that's really important, is to not lose sight of that. We're finding ways to win, but also we do need to get things fixed. Some of these games can make it easier on ourselves and try and put teams away earlier, but this is a good team that we played, so we expected a hard-fought battle, but yeah, it's nice to be on the right side of it.
Listen, so much of Baker's issues in Cleveland was not an ability problem, just like it's not an ability problem, wasn't an ability problem for Sam Darnold in Minnesota, or no, not Minnesota, with the Jets, or Jared Goff his first year with the Rams. But you need the coaching staff. You need a well-run operation around you. Again, unless you're an all-time generational talent, and even still, those guys have some hard things to have to overcome. That's why I've given Dak Prescott so much love, is he's been surrounded by absolute turmoil and chaos in Dallas. And Dak's gotten to the playoffs almost every year of his career, won multiple playoff games, retired Tom Brady, beat a prime Russell Wilson, like all of those things. And Baker, to his credit, has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like, this is a guy who can absolutely be an MVP candidate in 2025. I actually had him before the season, finishing second to Josh Allen. And I think Baker, especially to win an MVP, it's kind of like being a Heisman Trophy winner. Like, you got to have the quote-unquote Heisman moment or MVP moment. Well, Baker, 2 games in, 2 game-winning drives, came up clutch, 4th down play last night or Monday Night Football. So shout out to him. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.